how this is happening. But okay, like, yes.
Activia.
Cool. So now I have this main activity. My app will, if I hit make, it will build, and it will say everything's fine, right? But if I go back to my manifest, where my application information is, you'll see that this is red, which means that class is unresolved. It doesn't exist in the project. So if I change that to main activity, that will fix it. So, right, all good. And like if another thing that some people have had is if you right-click new, well, actually they do it under layout, but like if you right-click under layout and you say new, layout resource file, and you type in the name of your activity, so activity landing, right? This does not create a new activity in your project. That's why I was trying to get, I tried to show the workflow doing the wizard approach. But like, let's say you have this scenario. You've created a layout for something that you want to use, and you don't have an activity associated with it, like you can't navigate to it. Like, you can just delete this and create a new one, or you could right-click new Java class and create the name of the activity that you want.
Oh my, that's why I missed.
Yep,
I didn't realize there was the wizard.
Yep, there's that, and then this is the manual way of doing it. You could go create a new Java class, because that's what activities are. You're just creating two things. You're creating a Java class that contains the app.compat activity as a superclass, and then you're creating a resource file associated with it. So I'll build this, right?
It did it.
Okay.
If I had known that, I wouldn't have had to do so much damn research.
And then the only thing you add here is your uncreate. And there's a couple ones. So and then you have to type set content view, and then you can type in the name of your layout if you want. So you can do in here. You can do r.layout. Activity landing. That'll work. Any questions with that so far? Yeah.
So what would you say is the best, just easiest way to just create a new activity?
The easiest way is you just do file new. Okay, maybe it's not file new activity.
Oh, I didn't know that was down there. Blank.
Yeah, because I tried to create a class, but it didn't extend the app activity. So
yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I did the same thing. Then manually created the XML file, and then I had to go into the Android manifest and manually add the activity.
So yeah, if you manually add the class, right, then you're gonna have a lot of fun here, because then you have to go, okay, new activity name. Oh, cool! It auto-completes for you, so that's kind of nice.
It is, but it doesn't do anything about intent filters.
Yeah, but in most cases, you don't actually need an intent filter. Like,
for some reason, mine did.
Like, it needed a launcher, yes. If you need the launcher, then you need to add this intent filter that will say this is the main activity and it's the launcher activity. So that's why you need it. Any questions on that? Or like confusion? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the same thing. Can you show me how to make it or make it easy on how to do that?
The easy way to do it? Yeah. So you would just go file, new, activity.
Empty activity.
And then you do empty activity. That's kind of like the default of what we've been picking. If for some reason you already have, all the contents of that, like all the logic already there, and you wanted to save it, honestly, just get in the habit of having a text editor open and just copy and paste in two different.
Yeah, I noticed you can't have two projects open at the same time to pull old code.
Well, you can open open projects in different windows.
Instances.
But yeah, you can't split it.
Well, I'm just dumb.
Android is like magical, right? Like I told everyone to clean out delete their build folder, right? But then when I was grading assignments, I still had to do this process of clean, rebuild, and then run. So Android is just a joy. But
Android magic isn't compatible with Bones magic.
It is not. They're very conflicting forces of nature.
Hey, opposites attract,
So,
right?
Opposites attract. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Oh, actually, hold on. All right. So,
Opposites attract. It ain't fiction, it's a natural.
all right. So one other thing, if you've encountered scenarios where you have like a layout file that maybe you've like copied or you copied contents of it into a different one, and you're trying to apply new constraints to it, and you hit the auto constraint button, it won't necessarily work. You have to like clear them first. So like if I have this here, I move it up over here, I hit auto constraint. It's gonna work, but like, you know, sometimes like when you have multiple elements and you try and hit the auto constraint button, it won't actually fix it. You have to like clear and then start over. The button's like literally right next to it, so if you just hit this X, it will remove all constraints. And then you can do it again. So manual process, but all right. So any other questions on like activity kind of stuff? All right, I just wanted to kind of cover like what we've covered so far and like how, like, not like a percentage, but like what you can do with that. So we've covered at a high level how like different widgets are used in layouts and, you know, how to manipulate attributes within them. You know, we've covered constraint layout, which is good, it's a standard. I know the book uses linear and relative, but I feel personally that constraint layouts are like the way of the future, so just get used to it. Activities, we've covered a little bit. You know, intents, we've scratched the surface. And with those things, you could do, you know, I would argue, when I started working in mobile development, like that's kind of like what I do well. I knew how to do layouts, I knew how to do widgets, and like I was able to make a prototype app of like a camera that records you and plays it back. So like you can do a lot with what we've learned so far, but it's about refining, like understanding the basics and refining your understanding of them. But I just like want to say good job, guys. Like we've covered like a decent amount in 2 weeks, so there's a lot more, but it's a good start. Okay, so we're gonna go into intents some more. So like last week, right, we had that presentation that I put together for the activities that had the intent as part of it. So like, how many people would say they have like a good grasp of how to start an, like by show of hands, who feels like they could start an activity using an intent? It's okay. Like, it's not a big deal. It's just I want to like determine if I should go over it again. So, okay. So like starting an activity using it, like okay. To recap what an intent is, it's like you have. So if this is the OS, right? We'll just draw a box around it, and this is your application. Or technically your activity, right? And maybe you want to create activity too. So the way you're doing this is you're going to send a message to the operating system, and that message goes in the form of an intent. So intents are used in many, many different ways. Like you can open URLs with intents, you can pass data like a video or a picture through an intent. Like basically the best way that I've found to describe them is that they are like a message, right? So when you are saying start, like when you are creating your intent here, you're saying, okay, take the application context and define what our target is. So the way that that intent is being created is that you're saying, like from this current context, we're shifting it to this context. And if you like look at the documentation for intents, yeah, there's, like I said, there's tons you can do with it. So technically this is what we do. Okay, so what we're saying is, this is actually not good. My fault.
How many constructors do you have?
There's, okay, this is bad. Okay, so this constructor basically defines that we have our context of where we're currently at, and then we're specifying a class to go to. So, like I said, activities are Java classes. They are not layout files. Your layout file is interpreted by your class. That's what the set content view does. So when we are using that, intent equals new intent, the context and like the class, then you're telling the operating system, like, I want to spawn whatever's in the second parameter here. So whatever class you want to go to. And so that's what it does. Your intent, when you type start activity, or like when start activity with intent is called, this one, what it's doing is it's sending this message to the operating system saying, start activity. And so the operating system's like, cool, I'm going to give the application foreground to this new instance of an activity. So, add activity 2. And then this goes, the operating system then responds and say, you are no longer in the foreground. So then it goes through its process of on stop, and then eventually it gets destroyed. But it's like, you don't control creating this new thing. You're sending a message to the operating system to do that. So, like, does anyone have any questions on how that works? Yeah.
What's preserved or sensed by passing the context to it? Like, are you able to save like data there, or?
Like when you're passing get application context into the intent constructor? I don't believe so. I think.
Is that just saying that these are all part of one program? Or?
Yeah, I am curious about that. As far as another activity pulling data that could have been on another activity, you can only pass so much through the intent. Do you have to write it to a file and then pull from that file?
Kind of. Like you're not generally, like you pass, if you're passing data in an intent, you are passing like small pieces of data. You're not like, and anything greater than like a primitive, like a string, you pass in a stream variable, which basically says like I don't know the right way to describe this. So like if you have, let's say you have a video here, right? That you want to share this video with activity 2. Let's just pretend it's not part of our app. So we say, we do the same process, except the only difference here is you put set extra stream for your intent. And then what it would do, the operating system would be like, okay, I need to start this activity with a stream, and then activity 2 would say, all right, connect to this, and it would like stream that content until activity 2 has all of the information it needs in order to do whatever. And then it would like, then this would go into on pause, stop, all of this stuff. So like, it's the data that you're passing via an intent is not considered, like you should think of it like you're passing data that's meant to be shared, because that's how intents are built. They're not meant to, for your app, contain information. Like that's why you would use file storage.
So if I wanted to keep like user stats or something throughout my activity over multiple iterations, that would have to be written to a file. It's not something you just keep in memory somewhere.
What about you can
an object.
like
Can I pass an instance of an object to an intent?
I think you can if it's serializable, because then it is writing it to a file, then reading it into
a stream.
Yeah. So that is an option. You could. I mean, it just really depends like on how much data you have. Like if you're just keeping an int value, and you only want to keep it at the life cycle of the application, then you can just create a
Static class.
a public class that has a static variable. So public class my data, right? I'm just gonna abbreviate that. And then you have like public static
Object. whatever you want to throw into it.
And then anywhere in your activities, like any activity, you can reference this value, and you can check it or update it.
So you can make like a user class, and they could have all the information for a user, and you could see that from a different one activity
Yeah, I'm
to
just
another.
curious or wondering about like encapsulation and security and everything when you're using static, public static at that.
So at least in terms of like general security, so like I'm by no means an Android security expert, but like your accessor, like this in general doesn't actually matter once your application's compiled. Like it's really just about package access. So like I think this concept came around when you had like runtime libraries that were being like for C++. But this is really just like when you are writing like code in your Java stuff. Like okay, let's maybe a better way to describe it is like if you have like a Java library, like a jar that you make, and you have a public static thing. Someone can change whatever value is in that library, but if you have protected static, right, only your library can access that class.
Okay.
But the static, the only thing that's really being impacted here is like, it's just going to be preserved in your memory like the whole time. It's not necessarily any more or less secure than having a class variable. So it's just like it's time to live.
So if I create an instance of that data object in one activity and then I go to another activity,
It'll stay there.
it'll still have an instance of that object?
Yeah, because your application is running, like, okay, aside from these activities, like, you also have an application lifecycle, so it's fun. All right, does anyone have any questions on that, or is that? All right. Well, so I want to cover maybe like, so we talked about putting a string extra in there, right? But like, what about like if you want to open a URL? So like, just as an example of things you can do with intents, like, so I've found a nice Stack Overflow snippet. So if I go in here, just quickly change my layout so it has a button instead of a text view. So all I did is make a button in the center that says open URL. So we're going to do this as a shortcut. All right, so all right, so like, yeah, copying and pasting is great. All right, so I'm going to explain this. I just wanted to get it there first. Okay, so what I'm doing, right, is I'm getting the reference to the button like we always do, and then I'm setting an on-click listener, we always do, and then the only difference between passing a string extra to another activity, the only difference here is you'll see that the intent is not using that get application context, and then the class, right? We're doing intent.actionView. So this is an example of like another way to like another action that the operating system can perform through an intent. So it's going to query what applications can view this this data that we're passing in, because here we set the data of our intent to our URL. Intents can only read URIs, which is like a standardized data format. It can read text URLs, file paths, stuff like that. So we're setting the data of our intent to that, and we're starting the activity for that. Any questions on that? Cool. I'll just show you what it does, right? like this will take a minute to start, but okay. So if I hit open URL, what it does, and this is really okay. How many people remember the activity lifecycle stuff we talked about last week? Yeah. So if you remember what I talked about, there's different states, right? So before, I'll just show you again. So like when it's here, right, my application has it has been resumed, it has been created, it has been started, right? The minute I hit open URL, it's starting a new activity and it's putting my application in the background. So pause has been called on my activity right now. And right now this little drawer has the foreground. So that is called its onCreate, onResume, like onCreate, onStart, onResume. And from here, right, this is what's called a I don't remember the right term. I think it's a nav drawer. It might be like a shared drawer, but there's like some specific term for it. And like if I had like 5 web browsers open or any application that wants to receive data of this type, where it's a URL, can basically register to say it's like what's the right way to describe it? So you can define for your application or your activity an intent filter, and in that you could say when there's a data object that is passed to the operating system, I want to be notified of that. So like you can have, this is where like how many of you have used like the magic link option in an app? Like where you don't have to type in your password, you just tap a link from your email or text message and it opens the app for you. So that is something called a magic link or a deep link. And basically that app has defined a custom URL format that the operating system says, okay, when that is passed into, like when someone gets and tries to open that link, these applications want to be notified of that so that they can open with it. The actual process of building those is actually kind of really tough. So what I'd rather do is just show you, like, there's standardized ones that you can just consume, right? Like an HTTP is a standard format for a URL, right? So we can open it in Chrome and we just say, and it will just open, of course, yes. Right, it'll open to Google. And an interesting thing, if you're just playing around with it, right? Like, okay, what if I don't want a URL that I'm passing in? You could say, what if you're wanting to send a message to someone, right? You could say, so that probably wouldn't be view, but like, that's actually action send, right? So if I want to send someone, hello, and then I run this. So I kind of know that's action send just because I've done it before, but like, so I've hit open. Hey, all right, maybe I don't know it. So let's look it up. Honestly,
So the parse method is going to parse whatever data type is coming into that function.
yeah. So
it's going to parse hello.
yeah. So yeah, that's actually a good question. So
Nobody likes me.
nope.
That guy.
But you're not supposed to be that guy.
Okay, so that's actually a good point. All right, I want to make sure this works, and then I'll implement it. Come on. All right. this should work. Alright. So to kind of go over how I'm doing this, right? So just like we did view, there's an action set. And there's actually like intents. You know how we set a tag that we want to read from for our next activity? So there's actually standardized ones for text, URLs, like there's a bunch of like different kind of intent extras that you can just pass the default tag into. And you'd use these if you're trying to have your data opened by another app, because they're not going to know what you magically put in your tag. So here, right, we're putting an extra. I should probably rename this, but like basically we're putting an extra as text, and we're passing whatever our string was, and we're saying, so with this extra, since it doesn't know what type of data it is, it looks for the type, and these are, I forget the term. It's like it's a web.
MIME.
Yeah, MIME type. So set type is taking in a MIME type, and then it's starting the activity, and what it's doing is saying, okay, I have this generic data. What applications want to receive data of this type, the text plain, right? And so we see all these applications, like we have Gmail, we have Hangouts, we have, Messenger, right? So I'll just do Messenger, because that's easy. And it will you can actually prompt which conversation, just do nobody, you have to put somebody in.
Just copy to the clipboard. You can paste it in something.
Yeah, try that. I don't think this actually sends text messages. I don't know.
There's no. What about
There's got to be something.
like sticky notes or something?
No, we'll put it in our string element. Right? Yeah, there's our string. A lot of effort just to get. It's amazing that there's no standardized notepad, but it's okay. It's my Android.
Apple hasn't standardized Notepad.
Notepad minus.
Minus.
All right. So, are there any questions on?
Might get hit with a cease and desist on that. How did you paste?
How do I paste? Oh yeah. If you want to paste the emulator, you can just hold down left click.
Oh, it's hold down left click.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like you literally should pretend that your pointer is a finger.
Okay.
So
I'll give you the pointer.
I know, right? If you have a fancy touch screen, I have a Mac, so that doesn't work. But
Well, Macs are even less fancy than
I know it's surprising, right? But that's okay.
what? How many problems have I had with your laptop?
I hate Macs. Why use that?
All right. So, any questions on like kind of some of that stuff? Yeah.
I broke
Just up with the other
Broke
applications
back.
in different contexts.
Yeah. So that's like
Broke back.
it's
How did you
basically
post
it's like a mini activity. Like
How
if
did
you've
you
ever
post
seen widgets in Android, those are
went to a string analyzer application.
okay. I don't know if the right term for it is an activity, but it's basically like its own context. It's like a self-contained thing. So this is like, for lack of a better term,
And then when
like
he
an
clicked on that
activity.
button, he
So right
copied it
now
to
you
the
can see two
clipboard,
different
and
contexts
then
on the screen.
Yeah. Like
Might
if
be
you
like
there's certain actually don't know if that's accurate. I was gonna say that there's like sometimes views have the ability to check if it's partially visible.
Chrome, you can
So
try
that
putting it
I
in
think
the
would
address.
trigger it too, but maybe not.
Okay.
Oh damn. You pasted Messenger in a search bar.
I don't know what I did.
Alright.
Wow.
So
That's a special kind of special.
That's special, all right.
so does that kind of make sense to everyone? Like, does anyone have any questions on it? I'll maybe like put this in GitHub so you can try it out as well.
That'd be cool, because the whole copy and paste. I probably could have typed it up by now, but like I didn't know how far I was gonna go, so I'm like, I'll just wait for GitHub.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so let me do this.
Oh, I2.
Archer, mark that down for your vote.
Here's a fun shortcut. If you know, it's like control and then you do slash, and it will comment out all of those lines. So
Control Shift slash gives you the slash star.
what? I did not know that. That's cool.
I knew it for Komodo, I didn't know it for this.
Maybe it'll work.
That's what I do.
Whoa,
Hey,
that's
that
fancy.
I don't know why I opened my search bar. That's cool. That's a good shortcut.
Command slash is the comments with regular line comments, and Command Shift slash is comments it with block comment.
How do you do that?
Same. And then Command Shift slash.
Only somebody who makes lots of mistakes has to comment.
Shut up. Shut up, Tim. Like, let's try this. Nope, that didn't work, but I don't want to lose that code, so comment it all out. Let's try this. Stupid thing is he's right.
Never go back
Or
to
just
that
come
code,
out a little bit.
No,
Find where an error is.
I'll look at my code and I'll go, I have no idea where the error is. Comment the whole thing and start again.
Dang,
Why don't you
dude.
just comment little parts to
Well,
find where the
I mean,
error is?
yes, but if I don't know where the error is,
Say yes, sir, right away.
I was so confused with that session thing. I was so lost. I forgot that when you open view source, it reads
so-
the page.
Just bear with me. We have 15 more minutes and then we can take a break. So I just pushed what I had been kind of tweaking some stuff to GitHub, and on the string analyzer project, I had added a dependency. So I think I should explain like how those work and maybe just like some sanity stuff of like how to not break things. It's duck, right? Like,
Yes.
all right, it's not making a difference.
Yeah,
It's fine.
quack quack.
So Duck found this way in Android to add dependencies to your project. So remove that. So like let's say I go to the application editor, so I'll just do that. So if you go under, I think it's under build, the build submenu, or you can right click on app and you can go to, I think it's module settings. And then so both ways you can get to the dependencies. So you can right click and go to module settings under app, or you can go to build, and then there's this edit libraries and dependencies button. So once you get to here, there will be a lot of cryptic stuff in here. So basically, with Android, you have the ability to import libraries, right? And these libraries, like it's very beneficial to understand how to use libraries, because my personal philosophy is you should only ever be, like in app development, you're not building the library, you're not trying to build all the functionality from scratch, because if you did, it would take like years to do every single app. But instead, you want to be able to crank stuff out pretty quick. So understanding how to import libraries and use other people's stuff is important. Okay, so basically, is anyone here familiar with NuGet package manager? All right, one. All right, that's not. Okay, let's see. So basically, Maven is the way that Android keeps track of Java libraries. So, like, Maven is this central repository of all these libraries that people post online. So all the Android support libraries are in there. The Glide is in there. You know, basically, there's just like all these standard libraries that people have put up. And so, like, when you are adding a dependency, you're doing that from Maven. So if I hit, there's a plus button down here. if I go add, and you want to add a library dependency, because right now we're covering how to do stuff from Maven, but you can also add jars if you wanted to. So add a library dependency, and it'll pop up this search bar. And in here you have like some default ones where it's like support, right? But if you're looking for, like, let's say Glide. Glide is a very standard image view library. So Glide, right? I hit enter, doesn't work. It has to be lowercase, I think. Yeah, so it's case sensitive. So Glide is the first result that pops up. It's from BumpTech. So if you want, you can add that to your project. It doesn't hurt anything. Like, most of these dependencies aren't going to break your project, but it's when you start manually configuring it that's when it goes downhill. So I'll be honest, I didn't know about this editor thing. I've always just put my dependencies in my hand. So this is revolutionary to me. But yeah, so
Is this just linking to them, or is this actually kind of
Yeah.
downloading them onto your?
okay, that's a good point. So you have the ability to, I mean, all of the libraries you use have to be compiled into your application. So you have like these scopes on the right. So here you can say, I'm providing it, like you don't have to compile it, like Gradle does not have to compile this dependency. The compiled code is already available somewhere. Don't actually set that. It could be an APK, I don't really know how that works. Test compile is when you're running a test project. So if you've noticed, if you're looking at your Java code, right, it has this main code, and then it has Android test and test. So these are like designated to your Android unit testing or your Java unit testing under just test. So you can define those scopes. Like if you want certain dependencies to be included in your test code, you can add that here. Debug compile if you only want that library available in your debug build, or release compile if you just want it specifically in releases. And then compile is like generic. Anytime you build your application, it will be included. That's a lot, I know. Any questions so far?
So once you hit OK, that's done, that's in there.
What?
Once you hit OK, it's done, that's in there.
Yeah, so if you hit
So-
OK, Gradle will kick off a build to make sure it downloads the project, the library. That breaks.
Failed to resolve.
Install repository and sync. Cool. So there are some things that will need additional dependencies. Am I connected to the internet?
I got it too.
All right. Let's see. All right, cool. Let's do this instead. So
Revolutionary, and it breaks.
That's not how it always goes.
Yeah, this is where, when I was looking for the snack bar stuff, it said it needed to go in here.
okay, so
It's got it at the bottom.
okay, so
JUnit was the
you
last
need-
one.
Okay, if you need to remove a dependency, you can either go back to that project window, or you can, like, if you expand your Gradle folder on the left in the project view, there's this module app build.gradle, and you want to open that one, and then you just remove it from your list of dependencies. So that's when you mess up, it's important to know how to fix it. So, so it said we needed the support, like annotations, right? So that's what I'll do.
And how do we know which one we actually want? Because I looked up snack bar and there's like 6 of them.
Yeah, so, okay. Okay, so if we go, Glide has a GitHub page, right? Like every good library should. So in here, they tell you what dependencies you're gonna need. So this is why I probably got into manually adding them first, because it just tells you what dependencies you need and like, how to copy it, right? But like, if we want to use that tool, it's actually like probably a little better. So what we can do, so we see we need this annotation processor for here, right? So I think what we could do, And I'm not by no means an expert on this, so if someone figures out a way to do it halfway through while I'm explaining it, feel free. So we'll do glide, right? And we want this one, right? So the first one, we have it compiled, right? And then we're looking at like glide annotation. Okay, well there's also an annotation at the top, so annotation.
Seems to be a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go and do, and then up here at the top there's this annotation library, which I think is what we need, right? So Gradle is very trial and error. Like, I'll be honest, there's no like perfect way to do it.
I thought it was, the other one I needed was glide annotation.
Yeah. All right, let's show that.
It's glide compiler. Oh dear.
That's okay. See, this is important. So in this repository, right, we made it central. I think this is the right way to do it.
That's cool.
Alright.
There's no way of removing all that.
No, it's important. Okay, so like I obviously don't memorize how to do this, like because the time you build. Okay, so in my experience, anytime you're working with a build system, you get it working and then you just completely stop touching it. Like it's like Maven is scary. Like I hate Gradle and I hate Maven. Gradle's at least more readable to me now, but they're like I have no idea who built these things, but they're not readable. So
They're geniuses, that's why.
yeah, clearly. So,
I
all right.
have no idea why anybody can't understand it.
So under our project build.gradle, right, we had to add this Maven Central, and then Maven has a couple places where it's hosted. So Google politely hosts one of Maven's endpoints. So we just set the URL that we want Maven to point to, and then we put in the URL. Okay, so that's all we're doing in our project Gradle file. And then if we go into app, that's where we added our compile glide, and we added the annotation processor that we found off GitHub. And so kind of like you don't add dependencies in your project Gradle, you add dependencies in your app. So there's not really a better way to describe it, like, but I want you guys to get the experience using libraries, so I think it's like, this is kind of one of those things that you should have to trust me until you figure out a better way to do it, and then you tell me because I want to know too. So yeah, hopefully we can understand this pretty quickly together. Does anyone have any questions, or raise your hand if you're completely lost? Because we got like 5 minutes till 7, and we'll take like a 10-minute break, so till 7:10. But if you're stuck and it's not working, or like you have questions, feel free.
What was the second one you opened? You opened the app under Gradle scripts. What was the other one?
So under Gradle, the Gradle scripts, there's build.gradle and build.gradle. And then there's this nice little like gray parentheses where it has project and app. So project is where you have the Maven Central.
Okay, I see.
And then you define the URL that it's pointing to. And then in app, that's where you add your dependencies. But you don't have to do it this way. Unfortunately, I think this is probably the more like guaranteed way to make it work. So like if you need to add your support library, right? Like for the snack bar. So cool, there's all this stuff. So here we have that dependency. You can see that, right? But that's obviously not the right version, so that's okay. So I'll just put this in here though. And I'll save, and we'll say it shouldn't use a different version than the compile SDK. So that's fine. Like all you do is you look at what your compiled version is, 26, right? And then this is one way to do it. You could just do star.
What does star mean?
All.
Yeah, it's like any newer version of 26.
Is that rain?
Yeah.
Hopefully we have an umbrella.
I literally left my umbrella. It was too pink.
I think there's one in my car.
All right. Sorry. Star is
Yeah.
Okay, it'll go away.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
cool. Actually, instead of star, it's actually plus. So if you want to just do the lazy way, which it will say don't do this, but if you just do plus instead of like a specific library version, it will just give you the latest one. So now that we have that dependency, we could add a snack bar to our project. Any questions?
Does it come as
All right, by show of hands, who is completely lost? All right, and by other show of hands, who's paying attention? All right, well, let's take a 10-minute break. Let's meet back at 7:10. So.
See if there's.
Oh, for sure.
Proprietary code.
No, I don't want my battery dying that much time.
Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard, Bulbasaur, Wartortle, Blastoise, Bulbasaur, Venusaur, Ivysaur, Pidgey, Pidgeotto, Pidgeot, Pinkersaur. Reciting all the Pokemon. You said you can't remember any. Pinkersaur.
So you have to do the dependency thing.
Bulbasaur.
That makes more sense.
Yes.